we celebrate Rosh Chodesh. We celebrate many different things on the calendar, which indicates that we believe in the significance of time. We believe in the significance of all the different changes that happen throughout the cycles created by nature. We even say Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, and nobody really knows when that started or why, or who incorporated it. There's a pasuk that says that in the future, every Chodesh there's going to be some form of revelation, some form of closeness that we're going to have with the divine, and on every Shabbos. So we see that the Chodesh is a special time, but this is something that's related to the future. This is a holiness that is not because of events of the past, like the holidays, but it's because of what's going to be in the future that we're celebrating already. The sun and the moon represent masculine and feminine energies, the energies of creation. The relationship between the sun and the moon is what creates the cycle of the months. And so when the moon is receiving light, there is a significance. When the moon is receiving more light, there's a significance. There's something that's happening to us differently. Nature speaks to all of us all the time. We weren't designed to receive our beliefs from each other. We were designed to receive our beliefs by observing nature. Nature is very intuitive. Light, dark, time to be awake, time for sleep. The different behaviors of humanity are all represented by the behaviors of nature itself, the animals, the plants, the stars, the astrological signs. All of them are talking. They're talking by their very existence. The human body is talking by its very existence. It describes exactly what it's doing, if we would only understand the language of what it's saying. We are the language of what it's saying. We are the result of everything that it's doing. And yet, we've lost access to this process. We've lost the understanding, the appreciation of this process. This is the most important process of life. This is the only process of life. And yet we no longer understand it. And so in this process, the moon has its phase of darkness. Darkness meaning that it's completely separated from the sun, there's no light. And then there's something called the moiled, a newborn. The moon receives new light, a new cycle. This is all very meaningful in the language of nature. This is all telling us something about our own process and what it means to be us and how we work. Each one of us has a sun, has a moon, has everything that's created up in the heavens is also present within each individual. The human being is a small universe. It's a microcosm of the macro, the collective, the everything, the one that is all. And as a microcosm, he has representatives of everything that is inside of him. And these representatives are making him be. If any of them wouldn't do their function, then we couldn't be. Something would go wrong, because something that needs to get done wouldn't get done. And so everything is perfectly designed so that it all comes together, and that happens within each individual. This is a demonstration that is beyond anything that we can imagine of someone's very significant power. It's like, imagine if we come to an auction and we try to buy something versus somebody that keeps on taking out more and more stacks of cash and putting it on the table. So in this case, there's just power, more power, more power, more power, non-stop. Anywhere we look, we see the power, because it's so stable, it's so perfect, it doesn't blink. There's never even any indication that there could ever be a lack of power. The power is so immense, it's so immediate, that we take it completely for granted. We can hardly imagine what it's like not to take it for granted. That's how imminent and how powerful this power is. It's never failed us. Whatever it might be creating, whether we like it or not, it's creating with certainty. We can be kicking and screaming, and the show goes on. And yet, we can be completely blind to this power. So powerful, so mighty, so imminent. And yet, we can be in the complete darkness. Not even one ray of this power, of this light can come through. And that's because we've created the perception of darkness. We've removed ourselves from reality. We live in the world of the imagination. In the imagination, whatever we decide is important becomes important. We can imagine whatever we please. There's no such a reality, and yet we can imagine it. And in that imagination, there is no presence of this power, because he doesn't have form. The imagination cannot grasp something that doesn't have form. And so this power that's creating life is the light of the sun. And our capacity to perceive this light is the light that's reflected in the moon. And so these cycles that we're going through, the cycles of coming closer and going further away from the light, these cycles are cycles that resemble the cycle of the moon. This is why we, Klal Yisrael, are counting to the moon, and we bless ourselves that we should renew like the moon renews, because that's what's going to happen. There are many cycles. There are individual cycles and there are collective cycles. In the individual cycle, we see the different moods, we see the different levels of connection we have to reality and to what's happening. And these cycles are constantly helping us grow. They're constantly reminding us our true nature. They're constantly bringing us back to the areas where we still have weaknesses, where we still judge, where we still create distance from reality. And then there are the cycles within the collective. And in the cycles within the collective, humanity has descended to a place where it has lost all access to the light that creates it. It lost all access to the appreciation for the power that allows it to play with form. And it descended into a state where it's constantly consumed with forms. It's constantly exchanging forms for other forms, with no time to reflect on the formless, with no time to reflect on the power that allows all this to take place. And so in this cycle, Rosh Chodesh, the new beginning, the new head, is going to be the awakening of the light, the new Molid, the new birth, the birth of a human being that is connected to his own light, that can feel the rays of the sun that is creating him. And then that light grows continuously. That light was originally represented by a new nation. Avraham Avinu was Rosh Chodesh. And then every generation was another day. All the big leaders of the generations, another day, until we get to Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech is the full moon. The light has been stabilizing and increasing until there is an entire nation that's shining, and Shlomo HaMelech is at its head. But then came the descent. 15 kings until the destruction. And so, this process is going to renew itself. But this time, the moon is no longer going to descend into darkness. This time, the moon is going to shine like the sun itself. This time there will be no longer any discrimination against form, any form. All form will be recognized as the formless. All light will be recognized as the original light. All life will be sacred because that's the true nature of life. We will no longer judge life based on how it's dressed. We will know life for what it is. We won't be fooled by any costumes. And so this renewal, this is a birth, this is a beginning. It's a beginning of something that we sort of naturally expect to have already, and yet we don't have it yet. We're still working for it. We naturally expect to have it because that's within our nature. When we're going to be complete, that's what we're going to have naturally. And yet, we're not yet completely attached to our nature. We still have areas of illusion. We still have areas where perception doesn't meet reality. And so, this is still left for us to discover. And when we discover, when we learn to access this light, then there's going to be a renewal. There's going to be a renewal like the world has never seen before. The renewal is going to be for something that we thought we already have. And yet we didn't have it. Thinking we have it was just part of the illusion. We think we're alive. We think we've seen life. But life looks different. Life is not this. This is a preparation for life. This is investing, creating, so that then, when the time comes, we can have a life. Life was meant to be a certain way. Only when it's that way is it life. Everything else is an attempt at life. And so Rosh Chodesh is a reminder about the nature of our experience. Rosh Chodesh brings us back to realizing this process. We're processing in order to be able to contain light. We're preparing so that we can be a vessel for light. The kind of light that is more valuable than life itself. It's the kind of light that creates life. And life, not the way that it necessarily feels right now, but the immense power that creates. The life that is formless, that becomes all form. Because based on the forms, based on what we make of it, this creates the relationship, this creates the perception. The perception that's available to each individual in each moment is only available to that individual and is only available in that moment. And then whatever we choose to perceive, whatever we become, this will design what's available for us in the next moment. Just like whatever this generation will do, whichever way this generation will dress up life, is going to prepare what's available for the next generation. And the same happened before. This is a continuous cycle. This is a cycle of life. This is very similar to what happens between perception and the body. The cycle, the expectation that creates reality. So too, the cycle where the expectation of the parent creates the reality in the child. And so life continues. The loop of life, the process of life. And so this is what we receive. This is what gets passed on. Whenever there is a birth, there's a continuance. There's a continuance in reality, but there's also a continuance in perception. There's a perception, there's a specific form of perception that's being passed on to the future generation. Within our DNA, within our genetic code, what we're receiving from the previous generation, what we're receiving from the tree of life, is a lens on how we're going to see reality. Every generation is passing on a lens to the next generation. And only through that lens will the next generation be able to perceive reality. This lens is the capacity for the life force to perceive within the dimensions that we are familiar with. This lens is called the last letter of the Shem Havaya. The Hayachrona Shebeshem, the Malchus, is the lens that gets passed on from generation to generation, the lens of life, the lens through which we perceive. And that includes all the information that's inside of us that's making us. Because through what this information created, we perceive reality. The one that's perceiving reality is already something even deeper than the lens. The lens is sort of like the external shell of the one who is perceiving from within that shell. And so Rosh Chodesh is when there is a new light shining through from the one who is perceiving to the lens. The lens is being lit up by light so that the light becomes visible to the one who is perceiving. The one who is perceiving is all light himself, and yet when he looks into the lens of darkness, he doesn't see himself as light. And so when the one that's perceiving can finally shine some of his own light upon his lens, then he remembers his light. And this is the renewal. This is the rebirth. This is a new beginning. And all this is part of a process that we were meant to understand and to celebrate, to work along with. The knowledge of the process makes the process sweet. If we don't understand that there's a process, if we're frustrated by the process, if we're looking for the same and there's constantly change, then we're also obstructing the process to a certain degree. So life is all about cycles. Life is all about a process. There's always a process. There's always something happening. There's always going from one place to another place through consistent change. Slow, consistent change. And if we expect life to be something else, if we think rationally, and therefore we expect life to be stable, to be the same, then we're obstructing the process of life. Life is very stable in the sense of the formless, very unstable in the sense of the form. The form is continuously changing. That's the only thing that's stable about it. So Rosh Chodesh is the celebration of this process, the process of light and dark, the process of day and night, the process of revelation and concealment. The light that is constantly changing its form, constantly changing its expression. And so for us, in our process, individually and collectively, we should all be able to appreciate the process that we're going through, to connect with our process, to respect, to give it the proper importance, so that we assist in that process, so we don't become an obstruction in any way, so that the process feels right to us, so that we can get insight that makes it feel alive, makes it meaningful, allows us to have the right emotional relationship with our process. The process is our teacher, and we're always learning. We're always learning. We came here to learn. Even while we're sleeping, we're learning. Even our dreams are learning. Our dreams are us looking in through the window of perception into the biological thoughts, as the brain is collating our information without any conscious interpretation. It's just a process. It's a physical, biological process that if our perception is awake, it can observe that process. And it's wild. But that process is the reality of how our nature makes sense of information. What it presents to us in the waking moments is something that feels polished to us, that feels like home, like something we're used to. But behind the scenes, there is a physical process that's dealing with information, that's dealing with spiritual realities, that's trying to make sense of the world. We're always learning, and we will get the message. But the question is, how much are we consciously involved in the learning? And that relates to how tuned in are we to our process. And we can only tune into our process if we're not resisting change. If we're resisting change, we're certainly not tuned into our process. The nature of life, the nature of aliveness in these dimensions is change. Change is something that we have to learn to embrace if we want to thrive in this form. And so we're constantly processing, and the more we can surrender to our process, or even work along with our process, respect our process, the more we're consciously investing and improving the quality of what's taking place. So may we all find the wisdom, find the approach, find the attitude that's going to allow us to join our process, to help along, to find joy as we become, as we transform, as life makes us, whatever it is it needs us to be, it wants us to be, it desires from us. And we should be able to renew ourselves. We should be able to renew our spirit like the moon is constantly renewing. Whatever is taking place in our life, we should be able to find newness, to find freshness, to feel life like it was just given to us for the first time. To see that until now it's like we were looking at life from outside the window, just looking in at life, and we didn't get to participate. And now we're going to participate for the first time. So we should really be able to feel that, to see that, because this is really the way that it is. The way that we are now, we've never seen life. We've never had any chance at life the way that we have it now. The imagination gets tired, the imagination gets used to, and then it doesn't appreciate, it doesn't realize, it doesn't recognize. So coming back to realities, the appreciation that this is the only time we have this, and therefore it's the first time really. It's the first time that we get a chance to be the way that we are. We should take that opportunity and we should make the most of it.